Were realtors steering? I'm Dan Yampieri, broker owner of Remax Aspire. I saw this news article recently that NAR said that the uh, infamous now settlement will prevent realtors from steering. And I think that when I talk with realtors all over the place, the consensus is that while that possibility may have existed, I have not encountered anyone who was aware of a realtor that they knew or worked with who had steered based on compensation. In fact, the code of ethics stated that if the compensation offered was different, less than what the buyer had agreed to pay, and this also is congruent with the buyer agency agreements used in Maryland, that the realtor was obligated to share with their buyer client that information. And at that point, it was up to the realtor and the buyer client. Either the buyer client would pay that difference, the realtor would negotiate, or perhaps the buyer would say, hey, I'm not going to look at that home because of that. And that would be their right. But this idea that somehow realtors were steering and this is going to prevent steering is absolutely outlandish. I wish that this statement would be taken back because it's just simply not true. The second point that I want to make is about the lack of transparency. You're seeing now non-realtor affiliated, non-association affiliated multiple list systems across the country that are stating they're not going to be participating in the rules or terms of this settlement, not voluntarily at least, and that these types of changes are actually not going to help anyone. They're actually detrimental to consumers, but are likely to lead to more backroom deals, is what some of these MLSs are saying. Now, turning here to Maryland, Bright MLS, who created a form a few weeks ago, their lead attorney hosted this webinar to go over this form, which he and his team have now changed since then. And I anticipate they'll change several times between now and August 14th because, oh yeah, by the way, they don't know how to create forms, and they're not supposed to be creating forms for our buyer and seller clients to use. I'm talking about Bright MLS. The Department of Justice, I've heard now, feels that the MLSs who are choosing to now offer seller concessions in place of buyer agent compensation, which was required to be removed as a part of the settlement, but the ones that are offering seller concessions, that this is not in the spirit of the intent of the settlement. In fact, I've had agents already ask when they watched this Bright MLS webinar, isn't this a wink, wink, nod, nod? While Bright went so out of their way to say that it wasn't, a lot of realtors are already interpreting it as that it is. In fact, they pointed out that on the back end, the subscriber has the ability to state what the concessions were used for, including for buyer agent compensation. So, and again, I realize on the back end that wouldn't promote the so-called steering that they claim was taking place, that it would just be information to compare to other ways the concessions could have been used, but that this is kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod. So which way is the market going to move? Is the market here in Maryland going to move towards sellers offering these concessions in MLS, which, by the way, the buyer can retain those concessions if offered, and they don't have their own representation? Or are we going to move in the direction of co-op fees as we did before, but they're going to be off MLS? I think that nobody wants to go off MLS. Nobody wants to host the information on their website. No showing agents want to try to hunt down listing agents to get this information. And why should buyers have to go look at homes completely unaware as to whether they're going to be on the hook for compensation or not? And finally, there was this applause nationally about the change, the temporary lift, the Veterans Administration, allowing veterans to be able to pay commissions and fees. And while we don't want veterans to be disadvantaged, I mean, this is an applause that is really uneasy on my part. Nobody wants veterans to be in this position where they have to pay commissions. So again, I guess this is what happens when you take a system that works and you just break it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about any of the changes happening out there, I'd be happy to talk with you through that. Thanks again.